Good afternoon. Today we are together again at Istanbul Aydın University Blockchain Talks of Blockchain Academy. And today we have our special guest from India, Rohas Nagpal. Rohas Nagpal is a very well-known thought leader on blockchain, and he is the chief blockchain architect, hybrid finance blockchain. The most important thing is Rohas could guide really blockchain infrastructure in the world, and therefore we really appreciate his acceptance of our invitation to talk to us today. And today subject of Rohas Nagpal will be tokenization of real world assets on the blockchain. So the floor is yours, Rohas. We are very keen to listen to your thoughts. Please.
Would I be able to take questions also?
Yeah, at the end we can do.
Oh, okay. I prefer if questions can come as we are speaking. So, if anyone has a doubt, they can just put the question. I prefer that interactive. So, hi, everyone. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible to all of you. And I hope I'm not speaking too fast, because in India, we tend to speak very fast. So if that's the case, just let me know. I'll slow down. So let me start with a quick introduction. So I come from the cybercrime investigation and cybersecurity background, and I was in that field from the early 1990s. And in fact, I came across Bitcoin and blockchain in the year 2010 because of an investigation case. So I was advising one of the police departments in the world. I've worked for more than 18 countries in this. And the case that came to us was about the use of this thing called Bitcoin for drug payments, narcotics and drugs. Now, I had never heard of Bitcoin at that time. So I was quite intrigued. What is this Bitcoin and how does it work? And then we realized that, how it was working was you could go to this cafe and there would be some youngster sitting there who would take cash from you. And he would convert the cash into something called Bitcoin, which we didn't know what it meant. And then he would give you a number like 84. You go home, and a few days later, a book would come to your house through one of the e-commerce providers. It could be like a normal Harry Potter kind of a book also. And you would open it, tear out page 84, cut it into small pieces, take one of the pieces, put it on your tongue, and the drug would take effect. So that was the way in which it was happening. And of course, it was a very interesting case. And that's how I got introduced to Bitcoin. Then I continued my research in it, and I thought it was absolutely a very amazing invention. And then in 2015, I moved full-time into the blockchain space. And over the last several years, I've had the opportunity of working with 30 of the world's best banks and developing various blockchain-based solutions for them. My latest project, which I started in 2021, is called the Hybrid Finance Blockchain. It is the world's first regulated blockchain. So we comply with all the different laws. And that, in fact, is something that I wanted to start discussion with you on that. What I want all of you to understand that if you are talking about tokenization of real world assets, the kind of entities that you will onboard are going to be banks or other regulated financial institutions. And for them, the number one requirement is legal compliance. And because of that, we don't see much of traction in real world tokenization happening on blockchains like Ethereum, because those are permissionless public blockchains where you don't know who the person you're dealing with is. Now, as a bank, if you end up dealing with, say, a terrorist or a blacklisted entity, you could end up losing your license. So that is the reason these entities are very, very strict on which chain they can use. And that's why we are beginning to see the development of private or permissioned blockchains. So as a blockchain, if you want to use it for real world asset tokenization, it needs to comply with KYC, which is know your customer, AML, which is anti-money laundering, CFT, which is countering the financing of terrorism. Then it also needs to give freezing of funds. So that means if a court says that this particular transaction may be fraudulent and we need to block the assets, you need to be able to freeze that asset. Then it also needs to have consumer protection compliance, right to be forgotten legislation compliance, and data privacy. Unless a blockchain has all these, we cannot use it for tokenization of real world assets. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. Now that we've understood this basic concept, the next thing that we need to understand is that what do we really mean by this tokenization? What are the kinds of assets that we are going to tokenize? So sometimes people feel that it may be things like NFTs. Now, let me be very honest with you. The digital art NFTs, where what you end up getting is some kind of an image or a photograph, that is not what we consider as a real world asset. Because at the end of the day, no matter what we say, it's just an image. And you're not really going to be able to protect any legal rights in a court of law. So we don't consider that, but I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to explain to you what are the kind of assets that we do consider. Just give me a second. I hope you're able to see something on my screen.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So when we talk about it in the world, there are two kinds of investments that we talk about. The first is traditional, and that is something, which we talk about: cash, equity, mutual funds, stock markets, these kind of things which I have listed out here. Now, these are considered traditional. So we have a very established system all over the world, and it is very easy for you and me to go and buy these, whether it is a government bond, private bonds, mutual funds, stock market investment. So this is not what we consider when we talk about tokenization of real world assets. What we consider are alternative investments. So that's another very, very important and interesting concept. And that's why I've made a very detailed list to help you to understand what all gets covered under that. So the first point is carbon credits. So as we know, globally, because of climate change, various laws are being made. And in India also very recently, the government has come out with a very interesting law around carbon credits, who can issue, how they can be traded. So we consider carbon credits to be one of those real world assets which can be tokenized. Very recently in Dubai, which is, we can say it is one of the blockchain capitals of the world. In Dubai also, they have come out with a new government program in which they are going to tokenize carbon credits on the blockchain. There are already about 4 or 5 different projects such as, which are doing the same thing, and they are already beginning to go live. So that is the first successful tokenization real world case that we are seeing. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. The second is collectibles. So in collectibles, we could talk about art, antiques, classic cars, luxury liquor, sneakers, watches. These are what we are seeing happening. So the project that I'm involved with, we are currently working on Scotch whiskey casks. So not bottles, but actual barrels of whiskey, which can be tokenized, and people around the world can buy small portions and they can then buy and sell it like an investment. I'm also beginning to see some projects where they are buying classic cars, whose value goes up over time. Those are then kept with a custodian, and then you can very easily buy fractions of those. And that's another thing which we are seeing. Art is another very good use case where the physical painting or the sculpture remains in a museum, but you and I can buy fractions. So as the price of it goes up, we are able to make money from those fractions. So if we take an example of the Mona Lisa, from the point of view of insurance, the value of the Mona Lisa is calculated to be $1 billion. So what they can do is, the Mona Lisa remains in the museum in Paris, but you and I could buy tokens for $1 each. Say 1 billion tokens can be issued. And then over time, as the value of the painting goes up, the value of our token increases. Sneakers is another very interesting area. So some of you may already be in that. We have collectible sneakers. You don't wear them, you buy and just keep them. And over time, the value actually goes up. So that's another project that I'm beginning to see a lot of traction in. So in collectibles, I'm beginning to see traction in art, luxury liquor, as well as sneakers and classic cars. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. The next thing we see is in commodities. Now in commodities, there is agricultural commodities like coffee, wheat, soya, So there I'm beginning to see use cases and projects coming up in Argentina, which are already going live. Then we are beginning to see for coffee in certain parts of Africa. In energy, we are still at a very early stage, but solar energy, people are already beginning to tokenize that. Precious metals, of course, we have gold, silver, rhodium, platinum, palladium, out of which we are already beginning to see gold being tokenized. So one of the companies called Paxos, which is quite big in the stablecoin world. In fact, if you are aware that PayPal recently has come out with their own stablecoin backed by the US dollar, that's also in partnership with Paxos. So Paxos is already providing tokenized gold, where instead of you buying and holding on to the gold, you invest with them and then they hold the gold on your behalf. So that's what we are seeing in commodities. Then we are seeing a lot of traction in copyright licenses. So if you are new to the field, whenever we create things like books or movies, the government gives us a protection in the form of copyright. And once we own the copyright of something, we can give the license out to people. So let's take an example of the Harry Potter series of books. Now, the author who wrote it, J.K. Rowling, she first got a copyright in the books. She then gave a license to different publications to publish and sell books in different languages. So for each language, she can give a different license. Then she gave a license to convert the books into movies. Then to convert and make merchandise, action figures or dolls out of it. All of those are copyright licenses. So that's something which is being tokenized on the blockchain. This happens for books, movies and TV shows, music, software, and video games, especially because of the rise of Amazon Prime, Netflix, and other such OTT platforms. Somebody who makes a television show in one country can license the rights to do dubbing or translate or remake in another language very easily through copyright licenses. And those are, again, use cases that we are beginning to see a lot of traction. Any questions on this?
No.
I hope I'm not going too fast.
No, you are very well.
Okay. Then another area that we see is called as crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending. So that's another very interesting area where in crowdfunding, you are actually funding a new startup. So in one option is you're buying the shares of that startup, or second is you're buying the product of the startup, but the product is not ready. So let's say I have a startup which is going to make a very unique kind of a pen. So instead of borrowing money or giving out my shares, what I would do is I would say, buy 1 million pens for $1 each. Pay me the money today. I will use that money to set up my factory. Once it is ready, I will ship the pen to you, and then the deal is closed. So that's one way in which it can be done. Second is I could say buy the shares of my startup. Or third, we do peer-to-peer lending where I could say, this is what I want to borrow the money for. This is my profile. This is how much money I need, and this is the kind of return interest that I'm ready to pay. So in India, we are seeing a lot of such traction. In the US, we are beginning to see a lot of traction in crowdfunding. There's only a couple of things we have to remember. The regulation here becomes a little strict. So for example, in India, peer-to-peer lending comes under the central bank of our country, and crowdfunding could come under the securities regulator of the country. So if you're working on any project around these, you need to make sure you check with these laws in your local country. Then, of course, we have crypto and digital assets where we have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Litecoin. Now, we must understand that there are 4 different types of digital assets or crypto assets. The first category is what we call cryptocurrency, which is used as a medium of payment. So like in Turkey, I think you use the euro. Earlier, it was the lira. Am I right on that?
Sorry?
In Turkey, you use the euro, right?
And Turkish lira.
Oh, okay, Turkish lira. So my mistake. So the Turkish lira is a medium of exchange. Like in India, we use the Indian rupee as a medium of exchange. So if a crypto is used as a medium of exchange, we call it a cryptocurrency. Example could be Bitcoin or Litecoin.
Yeah.
But if we look at some other ones, like you may have heard about Uniswap, which is a very popular decentralized exchange. And Uniswap is kind of used as a governance token. We also call those as utility tokens. Or we look at Ethereum. I'm sure you've all heard about the Ethereum project. So there we use ETH for payment of gas fee. So in that scenario also, we call those utility tokens. Non-fungible tokens are things like, when we talk about Bored Ape Yacht Club or those images, we call those non-fungible. And security tokens are when we talk about cryptos which give you ownership of a company. So these are the four types, and the strictest regulation is in security tokens. If you're familiar that recently in the US, the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, they've filed a case against Binance and Coinbase, which are the two largest crypto exchanges, saying that many of the cryptos that they have listed are actually securities, and the permission of SEC was not taken while listing them. So that is why security tokens is something you have to be very careful about, because that is governed by the securities laws. Any questions on that?
No.
Another very interesting alternate investment asset we see is film financing. So India is one of the largest makers of films in the world. So in terms of number of films, the maximum number is made in India. And in terms of revenue, the maximum is the US. So here we are beginning to see crowdfunding of movies, where you and I, like as normal citizens, can actually put money into the film, which is then financed, and we could get a share in it. Another interesting thing to remember is that a film or a movie continues to make money for 60 years, because that's the length of the copyright license for the movie. So it's a long-term kind of a return investment, and a lot of people are beginning to put money into that. Then we have, of course, foreign currencies. So now this is a very interesting concept that we have to understand. In many countries, inflation is a serious issue. In fact, in Turkey, is inflation a serious issue?
Yeah.
So what would be the annual inflation rate?
It depends, but now we are by double digits, I would say.
Double digits, okay. So what could happen in this case? So let's say in India also, I think our inflation is about 7 to 8%. Now, that means if I hold the Indian rupee, the value of it is going to fall every year by 8%. That is why I put it into a bank which gives me a rate of return of at least that much. Because if my rate of return is lower than the inflation, the value of my money goes down and I end up losing it. Now, what happens in this scenario is I could put my money into a foreign currency whose value actually goes up. So for example, the US dollar. So as an Indian, I could buy the US dollar, which increases by 10% a year compared to the Indian rupee. But how do I do this? How can I buy the foreign currency sitting in India? That is where cryptos like USDT or Tether come into the picture. Makes it very easy. I connect it to my Indian bank account. Through an Indian exchange, I buy USDT and I keep it. Another great thing is that the exchanges also allow me to stake it. So my USDT lying on an exchange not only gives me the dollar value, but also gives me a rate of return of sometimes 8 to 10% per annum. So I can make a huge return. So I would say foreign currency tokenization is actually the first and most successful tokenization use case. And Tether is the leader in that, and they've tokenized more than about $50 billion already. So I would say that's kind of the number one use case. Are you aware of any such projects in Turkey which are tokenizing foreign currency? Is that already happened?
It is against our laws. We don't have it, but we do it normally. We buy US dollar or euro from the banks or exchange offices.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Then the next one is, of course, hedge funds. So many of you may be aware, hedge funds are not like mutual funds. While mutual funds invest in very secure investments like the stock market or debt market, hedge funds invest in riskier investments. And while they can give you a higher rate of return, the risk is also much higher. So a lot of hedge funds are now beginning to tokenize their offerings. So you buy the token, the money goes to them, they invest it on your behalf, and you can get a return on investment, usually higher than what a mutual fund could give you. We also have a very interesting concept called life settlements, where you can buy out life insurance policies. So as you know, a life insurance policy only gives you returns when you pass away, right? So then the money goes to your family. But there's an interesting concept where somebody can buy your insurance policy, give you the money today at a discount, and then whenever you pass away, they get the money from the insurance company. That is another very interesting asset that is being tokenized. But it's a very complex legal document, so we have to be very, very careful. And because insurance is a very highly regulated sector, that's another issue that we need to keep in mind. Then there is also litigation financing. This means, suppose you are going to file a case against a company, and let's say you are claiming $1 million. You don't have the money to pay your lawyer. So somebody would finance your case. And if you win, they will take a percentage of that. Now, this is something that has to be allowed by the law of the country. So something like this in India is absolutely not allowed. It's banned, it's illegal. But in the US, it is legal. That is why we see that a lot of the big class action suits which happen in the US, where, for example, billions of dollars were claimed from the tobacco industry at one time. Those are financed by other people who then can get about a 30% return of whatever finally the court gives. So litigation financing is another very interesting asset that is being tokenized. Then, of course, we have loyalty points. I'm sure that's a very popular concept in Turkey also. In India also, it's very popular. So globally, the airlines, hotel industry, restaurants, they give us a lot of loyalty points. But the problem usually is we can't exchange it easily. So if I have got loyalty points from Starbucks, I cannot go and use it in an aeroplane to get a cheaper ticket. Which is why now some companies are beginning to tokenize loyalty points. So you could earn it in a coffee shop and then you could spend it on an airline, even though the coffee shop and the airline do not have an arrangement with each other. So it kind of becomes like a tradable marketplace where you and I can come and we can exchange loyalty points. And I think that's one of the very good use cases that I'm seeing. It's been happening for several years now, but I think it's a very good use case.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, not so far.
Okay. Then, of course, we have patents. So whenever you make a new invention, like medicines and all, then for a period of up to 20 years, you get exclusive rights. Anybody who wants to produce that medicine or use the method that you have invented needs to pay you for it. So patents is another very interesting thing because the cost of getting a patent is very high. So you could tokenize it. People invest in your patent before it's granted. And then when it's granted over the next 20 years, whatever you earn, they can get a share. But the problem is patents are very difficult and costly to enforce. And it's only for a limited period of a maximum of 20 years, which is why I'm honestly not very bullish on patent tokenization. Then we have private debt, where you could directly lend to corporates. So we get together, collect the money, and we invest in global companies. Or distressed debt. Now that's a very interesting concept. It's also called as a non-performing asset. So let's say a bank has given a loan to a company, but the company is making losses. So the bank is not able to recover the money. In that case, it's declared as a non-performing asset or a distressed debt by the court. Then people could come together and buy out the debt at a huge discount. We call that as distressed debt. So that's another very interesting area that is coming up. Then we have private equity, which is investing into startups before they are listed. Then we have, very interestingly, what we have as the real assets. So whether it is aerospace, like we know Elon Musk is sending rockets to Mars. So we could actually buy a share in that rocket, for example. So now many countries are beginning to explore outer space for mining. So we could tokenize that project, pool money, and then whatever profits come, we could have a share in them. Or aviation assets like aeroplanes, helicopters, drones. Drones are being used in a very big way for deliveries. So that's another thing which is being tokenized. So I find aviation assets one of the best use cases. Infrastructure, where government wants to build highways and dams and bridges and roads, which are very expensive. They can tokenize it. And over the next 20, 30 years, whatever toll is collected, that can then be tokenized and the token holders can get the money. Mining and mineral rights for all sorts of minerals. and natural resources like water, all of that can also be tokenized. Last few assets left. Of course, real estate is a very big tokenization. Real estate can be divided into agriculture, commercial like office buildings, industrial like factories, maritime assets should be in the earlier one, not here, residential assets, and real estate investment trusts. In India, we are seeing a very large number of real estate tokenization projects which are successful. And people are regularly using it to buy small amounts of real estate. So if you can't afford to buy an entire building or an entire floor, you buy a fraction of it. Whatever rents come, you get the money. And then whatever profits are made because the value of that real estate is going up, again, that's a profit for you. Finally, we are seeing sports teams like football teams and cricket clubs. They are also, it's not happened yet, but they're talking about tokenizing them. Structured products like CDOs, and finally trademarks like, logos of companies or brand names, they are also being tokenized. So this is the kind of list of assets that are already being tokenized. Any questions?
Already just a comment. There is also sports teams are also on the tokenized, and it is used also in the fund shops or buying the tickets.
You're quite right. So in fact, there is this project called Chiliz, CHILIZ, and it's a token you can buy on the exchange, and then you can take it into their app, and then you can buy and sell tokens of different sports teams, which gives you voting rights on some of the things that your favorite football team can do, or their uniform and that kind of stuff. So yes, that's a very important and interesting use case. Any other questions?
No.
Now, let me just share my screen again. And now let me walk you through the process of how do we actually tokenize something. Just give me a second. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Much better. I think you should shrink a little. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
More.
Shrink it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's a long process. There are about 12 steps. So let me just quickly walk you through. So let's say that we want to tokenize something in the aviation industry. Let's say that it is going to be a small jet, a private jet. So the step one would be to select the asset. So depending upon the use case, so let's say we want to use this private jet for transportation. If people want to go from one place to another where commercial airline service is not available, or medical emergencies, people need to be moved. So we've identified the asset based upon the use case, right? Which private jet would make the most sense? So that is step number one, asset selection. Second step would be asset valuation, where now we value the asset. So if it's a brand new asset, obviously we get the rates from the company. But what if it's an older asset? Usually it's a second-hand asset. It's already flown for a few years. So we need to get all the documents. Depending upon the asset, this is a very complicated process. So it is probably the most complicated part. How do we value it? So if it's a piece of real estate, we need to get a valuer. If it's an airline or an airline asset, we need to get all the documents in order. And then we need to get the valuation. And all those documents need to be made available. Then step number 3, we look at the legal and regulatory compliance. What are the different kinds of laws that are going to come in? What kind of licenses do we need to take? All that needs to be done. So we need a strong legal team to do that. Then we go to step 4, where we define the ownership structure. Now, usually what we do and what I recommend for expensive assets is forming an individual company for each asset. So if it is going to be, let's say, a $10 million private jet, we create a company which owns 100% of the jet. So if you buy shares of that company, you are automatically buying ownership of the jet. Now, this is a very important concept which most people don't understand. If we do not structure the ownership correctly, tomorrow the token holders will not be able to protect their rights in a court of law. And because company law is the most well-established law in almost every country of the world, forming a company for each asset is kind of the best approach. Of course, if it is a very small asset like a carbon credit, where each carbon credit may be from $1 to $100, obviously company is not a good way. In that case, we straight tokenize. So this ownership structure depends upon the asset that you are tokenized. Any questions? Okay. Then once we've done this, we develop a prospectus. So just like in the stock market, when we are raising money, we need to make a document. Similarly, we create a prospectus which talks about the asset, the use case, the valuation, all the reports, the legal compliance, and the ownership structure. So that prospectus,
like pitch deck. Yeah, pre-pitch deck.
Actually, it's beyond much more than a pitch deck. It's a very detailed legal document.
Okay.
So it could be going into hundreds of pages. A pitch deck can also be made, but that would be like maybe 10 or 12 slides. This is a very detailed prospectus.
Mhm.
Once this is done, then we actually create the token. So this could be ideally should be created on a permissioned blockchain, and it could be created like a fungible or a non-fungible token. So depends upon whether fractionalization is going to happen. If yes, so suppose it's a plane, we know we are going to make 10 million tokens. So we create it as a fungible token. If it is going to be something like a carbon credit, then we could create them as NFTs. So it totally depends on them. Then comes point 7, where we issue the token and we list it. This could be listed on a stock, on a crypto exchange, or it could be listed on a decentralized exchange. Both options are available, central or decentral. Are crypto exchanges legally allowed in Turkey?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So then you could list it on one of those. Then we do the marketing and promotion to get people to get in. Then you do KYC of your investors, give them all the relevant support so that they can buy the tokens. Once it is done, then you manage and monitor the asset, because now that the plane is started to function, some company needs to be there which is going to take care of the plane, make sure the maintenance is happening, all the revenue is being collected. So all of that happens in the stage 11. And then finally is the profit division. So on an annual basis or a monthly basis, whatever profits are being generated, they would be provided as dividend to all the holders. And that's the reason we recommend using a company as a structure, so that taxation is also good and the tax can be paid by the company, dividend issued to the token holders, and there's no liability on them to pay the tax on them. So this is kind of the 12-step process that we use for tokenization. Any questions?
No.
Okay, that's kind of more or less what I had in mind. Now I was hoping if there are questions, we could have it interactive. I understand maybe it's a new topic for many of you, so may not have topics, but whatever you have ideas, if you've got some case study you want to discuss, I think we can do that.
I'm just looking to the chat. I think nobody has a question at the moment. I think everybody would like first digest what you told, because it was really very good size to learn and understand. And it is very new cases you put on the table. I'm just checking once more. There is no question. Okay, so Rohas, first of all, on behalf of Istanbul Aydın University, Blockchain Academy, I'm very happy to have you today as our speaker at the webinar. I know you are very busy and tight scheduled person. Therefore, I think we are very grateful to learn from you, and we hope to have be in contact with you, and we will feel free to contact you for any projects or any case. And please also, you may have the same idea with us. We are always, as Istanbul Aydın University Blockchain Academy, we will be always ready to cooperate with you and to help you if you need anything from our side. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And there's just one thing I just thought I'll add here. So in India, the government has set up a regulatory sandbox, which gives some kind of permissions to do use cases on blockchain, which may otherwise not be legally allowed. So if there are any Turkish startups, firstly, who want to work in the tokenization world and they want some kind of a regulatory support, then I think it would be good for them to apply. So you can apply even if you're not an Indian startup. And if any of your startups, if you need help, please feel free to reach out to me.
Sure.
They can connect to me on LinkedIn and I can totally help. And I look forward to maybe, associating with your college, university also, and helping any of these startups. So,
thank you very much. It will be very appreciated because we have now many startups, many youngsters also with the good ideas. I think we will need your help after. Thank you very much, Rohas, for today.
Bye-bye.
So today speaker was Mr. Rohas Nagpal, and he really shared his ideas with us. Very, very important ideas of him on the tokenization of the assets on the blockchain. So we are very thankful. Thank you very much.